Hello everyone, this is Anto Chávez with Be Latina News. Today we're interviewing Bernie Molina, who's the author of Herencia Cookbook. And today is also Dia de los Muertos, and food is often the center of many traditions and just cultural events, which is the case for this day as well. So we're going to talk about that with Bernie, and we're going to delve into her culture and her background and how that is really reflected in the book. So let's get started. She just joined. Hey, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing well. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yay. So where are you in the world right now?
I'm in Southeast Los Angeles in California in my humble home. My husband is watching my son in the other room. We got all the doors closed
Oh,
so that my son can stay sleeping so that we can have this interview in peace.
that's good. That's
How
good.
about
That's
you?
good. I'm in Arizona. I recently
Oh,
moved
nice.
to Tucson, Arizona. So it's nice, very sunny, but mostly quarantining like everybody should.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
sorry, I spent a lot of time in Tucson because my family and I fly to Tucson and then we drive to Mexico when we visit our in
oh,
Sonora.
yeah, por Nogales.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Super
yeah,
close
yeah.
by.
My partner's family is from that area.
Oh, nice. Wow, what a nice coincidence.
Yeah, yeah, it
Cool.
is. So let's talk a little bit more about you and your background and just who you are and what you do. So just give us a little intro for those who may not know you who are in the live.
For sure. So, like you said, my name is Bernie Molina, and I am the author of Herencia Cookbook. And it started off as a personal project, and then it just like turned into this, what I have now, the cookbook. So I'm half Mexican American. My dad's family is from Sonora, Mexico, like I just mentioned. And I'm half Salvadorian American. My mom is from El Salvador. My husband's from El Salvador too. And when I grew up always being surrounded by food, by seeing the women in my life cook. I had the privilege of knowing my great grandmother until I was 10 years old, and she lived in Sonora. We'd visit her very often because that time was a gift. Um, and I'd always be ahí detrás de ella metichando, like, what are you doing? What's that? What's that? And she had like the
I
patience that
love that.
only a great grandmother could have that level of patience, you know? And then here in Southeast Los Angeles, my grandmother, my dad's mom, my great grandmother's daughter, she lived here and she was really in charge of taking care of me while my parents worked to
Hmm.
provide for us. And so same thing, I'd always just be like so curious, like, what's that? What are you doing? And she'd be like, sit down, let me serve you, just relax. And when I wasn't around them, I was around my mother, and my mother owned and operated a Mexican bakery in Inglewood, and I just soaked it all in. I've been surrounded by food my whole life, um, but I never took it too seriously. Like, it was a part of my life where it's just like you see it every day, it's just like, oh yeah, that's what it is, and it's part of my life, and that's it. And when I moved out, when I bought my first place, I had my own kitchen. Like, this is like my kitchen. And it was so
Hmm.
important to me to learn how to cook these recipes I had such an emotional attachment to. Like, enchiladas de queso. I remember Lent. My mom would always make them on Fridays during Lent because they were meatless. Or, frijoles refritos. My grandma would make them for me every time I'd come over. Or, whatever it may be. So I wanted to learn to make these. And my grandmothers were no longer with me, but my mom learned a lot of these recipes from them. So it was like this project. I'm like, okay, mom, we got to learn. Like, and what, you can teach me the Mexican and the Salvadorian recipes. Like, I have to learn this. And as you may or may not know, a lot of Latina señoras do not use measurements, and it is super confusing to try to learn from them. Oh my gosh, my mom and I would like get frustrated, not with each other, but just like, I'm like, how do you do it? She's like, just un poquito de esto, mija, yeah, you know? And so I was like, I'm gonna try a more like a more like, not traditional approach, but like a more data-driven approach. And I would like Google these recipes and I would see them. And like I said, these recipes were so personal to me. And then I'd see them, and I felt a little uneasy that I didn't know if my culture was being celebrated or appropriated when I would read them online or in certain books. So I said, you know, if I don't see it, then I have to create it for myself. And of course, there's great, you know, um, blogs and cookbooks out there from other Latinas and Latinos and Latinx persons, but I just knew that these recipes, like I had to do it. Like I had to do it for myself, and I had to create this fusion of food inspired by, you know, my Salvi identity, my Mexican identity, my Los Angeles upbringing. I just think it's so unique, and I have never seen it before, and so I just was really eager and motivated to do it.
And so, you know, this was your inspiration for it, and it's coming from two, you know, some people see us all as a monolithic culture, but it's very different. You know, there are like overlaps, but is there, you know, a fusion of these two cultures in the book?
Yeah, and some of it is very intentional, and some of it just happens because like that's how I cook, you know, because that's how I grew up. Like, um, for example, when I make beans, I add Monterey Jack cheese, I add jalapenos, I mash them up. And so in pupusas, you just have beans. No one really puts like jalapeno infused beans in pupusas, but I do. That's just how I eat them. So like that's the type of fusion that I just unintentionally, unconsciously did. And then, you know, there is a very intentional fusion. Like I made, in the book, there's a recipe for a margarita, which is very Mexican, but I used, you know, a lot of margaritas have like tamarindo or strawberry. This one I put nances, which is like such a Central American fruit. Like most Central Americans will be like, oh, nances? Like what? There's an agua de nances in this? But it's a margarita. So that's like really intentionally a fusion recipe.
Cool. Yeah, I feel that so much because growing up, I'm Venezuelan, but
Nice.
my mom was born in Cuba, so like that side is Cuban.
Mhm.
But she left when she was 3 years old. But like her household, obviously, you know, the culture was still there, especially in the food. And
Mhm.
so, you know, I wouldn't even realize, like, at some point in my adulthood, like, I realized, oh, this is not Venezuelan. It's
Yeah.
like, I
Yeah.
guess it's not really, yeah, you know, you don't even notice as you're growing up, you're just eating this, like, mixtures of the food and the culture that your parents are
Exactly.
from. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
really
Totally.
cool that you incorporated that in the book. And
Yeah.
so, like you said, learning how to cook family dishes and passing on recipes for generations to come, it's also really, you know, it's always been like a way to preserve one's culture
Yeah.
and also honor your ancestors. So, you know, was that included in the research portion of your book? How did that look like? And also the writing process, how did that look like?
Yeah. Yeah. So definitely. If you look at the book, the acknowledgments, it's like 2 pages long. It's long. But because like I said, I had to like honor my great grandmother, my grandmother, also my mother. Like this book would not have been possible without her because I learned how to cook from her, you know, like I would watch my grandmothers, but I was too like little. Like they would not trust me with a hot stove at that age, okay? But you know, when I was an adolescent and a young adult, you know, my mom is the one who taught me to cook. And my mom has she's Salvadorian American, but she has a very Mexican style of cooking because she's been married to my father for so many years.
Hmm.
And then, you know, like I said, my husband's Salvadorian American. So my suegra really taught me a lot of recipes too, like pure
Hmm.
Salvi style recipes. And so these four women influenced who I am as a home cook. They influenced who I am now, like as a mother. Like, you know, my mom and my suegra have been such a help to me. Um, and so definitely I honor them in like everything that I wrote in the book. I tried to make sure like that I was elevating them, that I was giving them the respect that they deserve because I feel like so many times, for example, like they're not professional chefs, but they make some good food. Okay, like they are very talented and they use their intuition and experience, and I think that that's something to be honored. And so to answer your question about the writing process, it was just phone calls with my mom and my suegra, because like even though like I'm 30 now, like I know how to make all these foods, but like I just wanted to be like, for example, in the book there's a little section in almost every recipe that says like senora advice, like how to like elevate the dish, so sometimes I'd call them and be like, okay, like this is how I make it, but like what would you add as the senora advice? And my mom would say, oh well, instead of salt you got to use Knorr chicken seasoning because that's what's going to give it the real flavor. you know and I'm really proud to say that I never met my husband's grandmother. She passed away when he was quite young, but she helped my mother-in-law a lot postpartum. And I was in my own postpartum journey recently. I'm like 8 weeks postpartum right now. I just had a baby, and
Yeah.
they talk so much about this senora, Mama Maria Luisa, and like I said, I've never met her. My husband doesn't really remember her, unfortunately. But in the book, there's one section in the Salvadorian tamal recipe that says, senora advice from my husband's grandmother. And I just hope she knows that she's honored in some way, because she's my son's ancestor. She's my husband's ancestor. So it's really important to me. And these are all señoras that I'm thinking about this weekend for Dia de los Muertos for sure, because I wouldn't be the mother that I am now without them.
Yeah, that's so beautiful.
Thank you.
And so now that we're talking about Dia de los Muertos, what do you think is the role of food in Dia de los Muertos?
I'm laughing because I saw a meme yesterday that said like Mexican food is so good that Mexicans keep coming back from the dead to eat more food. Because
Love that.
Yeah, but it's so true. Like we put food on the ofrenda. So, like I said, I'm from Sonora, which is a northern state, and in my the way we celebrate Day of the Dead, I know a lot of people put the food on the ofrendas. The way we would celebrate, and I'm really bummed that I can't. So we would go to Mexico to celebrate, and I'm really bummed that I can't go right now because I have to stay put in quarantine, and also I have a 2-month-old. I have no business traveling with a 2-month-old. It's not gonna happen.
That's tough.
Yeah. So, but when life is a little more normal, the way we celebrate is we would fly to Tucson, we drive to Mexico from there, and we spend the whole day in the cemetery. It's like a picnic. Like my dad is in charge of bringing the speakers that attach to his iPod, and we just listen to music. We blast it, music that reminds us of my nanas, who are actually, they're buried next to each other, which is really nice. Like we get to stay in the same spot all day. And all the tios are in charge of bringing like the coolers with the beers and the sodas and the water bottles, and the older cousins usually buy the younger cousins like chucheria, like chips and Mexican candy, and and then the tias are usually in charge of bringing food. So like I don't have a house there, so I can't really cook. So sometimes like I'll take like tacos from our favorite taco spot. My nana loved that place. She had a really good reputation in the town. Like if she was everyone's friend, and so they knew her there at that taco spot. Intergenerational customers for that taco spot.
What was her name?
So my grandmother is my nana Isabel, and my great grandmother is my nana Lupita.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so we just have like this picnic, and I know it's so weird because it's a cemetery, but it's flamboyant and alegre and brightly colored. And then you have these trios norteños, because Sonora, it's a norteño state. You have these musicians walking around. Yeah, and they say, hey, do you want a serenade for your loved one for a few pesos? And we're like, heck yeah. And then just whatever musicians come by, we just each kind of take turns paying them. Each family maybe takes turns paying them, and it's a party. And it's not sad. It's a celebration of their life. And maybe we'll be telling stories like, oh, do you remember this time that this and this? And we'll just tell like stories about them. And what's really nice about that cemetery is that it is a family cemetery. Like my father's grandparents on his paternal side are buried there. So we go pay a visit there too. An uncle who was like a father figure to my father is buried there, and lots of other relatives. We mostly spend the day, like I said, near my grandmother's. but we'll kind of take walks, throughout the day and kind of visit the other loved ones as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, unfortunately, you can't do that this year, but are you doing anything special at home?
Yeah. I'm it's not a party. It's definitely more humble than it's been in the last years, but first and foremost, this morning I lit a candle to La Virgencita. I don't know if you can see him, but there's a pink candle back there. So
Oh, yeah.
I lit a candle to La Virgencita, and I just said a prayer for all the matriarchs who are not with me anymore, who have been such a big influence in my life, and I'm just gonna say their names, tell stories about them, and make food that reminds me of them. So one food that like we would eat for special occasions was pozole de res, pozole rojo.
Hmm.
So good. So
So good.
yeah, so I'm gonna spend my day making that and just thinking about them, remembering them, and enjoying the food, for their behalf, on their behalf, and setting out a bowl for them too.
Yeah. And, this is the case for so many events in different cultures, especially in Latin America. What do you think is, how do these dishes connect people?
Oh yeah. Well, I feel like you break bread with your loved ones, and it's sort of like breaking down a barrier. It's intimate eating, I think. I'm happily married to with all respect to my husband, but I remember one time I was talking to someone and he said, let's go on a date. And I said, should we go to dinner? He's like, no. He's like, first date food. He's like, I don't want to be chewing. Let's go for coffee. And I was like, get out of here, and that's why I'm married to my husband. I'm not that person. Just kidding. And but there is something really intimate about being able to eat with someone and not just eat with someone. There's also something even more intimate about cooking with someone. I love seeing like when we would have big family reunions, like las señoras congregating together, working as a team to make, to feed all the loved ones. So I think food has a way of definitely bringing us together. And there's so much of our senses are involved with food. You see, like, for example, just pozole rojo, you see the bright red color, maybe it's in a blue bowl that contrasts the red so much. And then you smell it. Maybe you feel when you squeeze the lemon into it, or you pour, sprinkle the cabbage and the radishes in there.
I'm hungry now.
Sorry. Most people get hungry when they talk to me. It's just what happens. But a lot of your senses are involved. So there's food that just takes me back. Like I said, my Nana Isabel, well, they were both great cooks, but all of the cousins would say that her beans, I know beans sound like a humble dish, but her beans were so good. And we'd put them in a really paper thin flour tortilla and roll it up. And whenever I make beans now, I always think of her. Like, I just cannot disassociate the two. And beans are just such a staple of food. So obviously I'm thinking about her a lot. And I know that there's just dishes that maybe, one day my son is going to associate with me too. Or my husband thinks like, oh, I like the way my wife cooks that. Or, there's just dishes that I'm like, oh, my suegra makes that the best way. And so they remind me of people that I love. Maybe they remind me of moments in time. And so I think food it's simple because it's such a basic human necessity to survive, but there's so much beauty to it that just makes it even more special. It like feeds your soul or something.
Yeah, that's the interesting part because you could eat anything at any point. It's a basic necessity, like you said. But there are special things that just make it, connect people and have that like that that it factor that if you try your nana's beans and then some other person's beans, you would tell which ones are which ones.
Yeah.
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 That's really cool. Well, thank you so much for talking to us about it. Do you have any projects coming up or anything related to the book that you'd like to tell us about? Also, promote your social media so everybody follows you.
Yeah, for sure. So you can follow me at Herencia _cookbook. You know, I have a website where, you know, the book itself has over 65 recipes. Like I said, there's Salvadorian, Mexican, Los Angeles inspired. But on the blog, I'm constantly putting recipes as well because cooking is such a big part of my life. So sometimes I'm like, oh, I wish this would have made it to the book. It's going on the website, you know? So there's definitely a lot of content for people to interact with there. As for projects coming up, there's a lot in my heart that I still want to do because it's just so important for me to celebrate our Latin culture and honor the matriarchs who nourish and nurture us. But for now, like my immediate future, I'm focusing on motherhood and I'm enjoying every moment about it.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah,
Thanks.
you should. I mean, especially he's also so little, so you're gonna enjoy
He's
it and
tiny.
also go crazy, I'm sure. So
Yeah,
it'll be fun.
for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Bernie. It was really lovely to have this conversation with you, and I hope you have a nice Dia de los Muertos, and you honor all of your people, and
Thank
you
you.
stay
Thank you for
safe.
having me. Yeah, it was really nice talking to you too. Thank you for allowing me the space to talk about my nanas. It was really nice. So I hope you know that I got a lot out of this conversation. I had a really good time
Yeah.
talking to you.
Yeah, I'm so glad. Our platform is always welcome to you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Let's take care. Thanks
You
again.
too.
Okay. Bye.